The RLCraft Hardcore config. A config so daunting, so unknown, that even to this day, only 1 in 150 RLCraft players have ever tried it. The config was created by RLCraft's author, Shivaxi, and is currently the newest version of RLCraft that anyone can play. Why have so few people played this config though? Well, it is on the verge of impossible to beat for one, and for two, it wasn't well advertised. In this config, monsters in RLCraft do increased damage and have increased HP every step you take away from 0-0. Every 1000 blocks from 0-0, difficulty also increases by 1, for up to a max of 20. For every difficulty, enemies do 25% more damage and have 50% more HP. For reference, a zombie with 20 HP will have 420 HP and deal 500% damage at difficulty 20. You also start with only 2 hearts on each body part and can't use modded weapons or shields at the stone or wooden level. Oh, also you only get half XP from everything, and battle towers are twice as rare. Oh, and all bosses are rare, ultimate, or infernal, and all other Spartan weaponry melee damage weapons have been severely nerfed. Oh, and you start in a random season, and temperature changes are more severe than in normal RLCraft. Those are just a few of the 1380 changes that the hardcore config possesses. As for the rules, you of course need to play on hardcore difficulty, and you need to choose the option larger biomes when creating your world. The mod author of the hardest mainstream mod pack on the planet went out of their way to make this config impossible to beat, and I decided that I wouldn't stop until I beat it within 100 days. After a few dozen attempts and a lot of pain, I finally survived. And this is my story of how.
What the
Day 1, I found myself spawning in the middle of a pleasant forest biome. Birch and oak trees all around, but I had no time to waste. I wanted to try to tame an Epian mount on the full moon that was coming up. Night 1 in RLCraft, just like in vanilla Minecraft, is always a full moon, and Epians are cool bat flying mounts that spawn on full moons. I sadly could not find enough materials to tame an Epian, but I did find a crater base that I hunkered down in and looted. I was sad to know that I would need to wait 8 more days before another full moon, but I was content with my start, because crater bases give a lot of good stuff. Day 2, I took my cooked pork chop, stone tools, and other miss items from the crater base and made my way over to a nearby birch forest, where I committed deforestation for 2 entire days. I wanted birchwood because trading with villagers is one of the safest ways of getting XP on the hardcore config, and I need a lot of it. Plus, I had 8 days to waste before I could try for my Epian mount again. Oh, I should get a rock, you say? No. On the hardcore config, avian treats can only be made with fish fillets or concipede meat anyways, and you only get 1 avian treat per output. 5 fish fillets and 2 bones will only get you 1 avian treat, and you should focus on defense first before leveling up gathering in order to fish. XP is hard to come by on the config, so I didn't want to waste any. I was willing to wait for night 9 for my Epian. Day 4, I go off in search of a village to trade my paper with that I obtained from chopping trees. I fortunately find a village, but there is a problem. A dragon beat me to it. I thought my run was over. I was prepared for a reset as the dragon started burning my library to the ground as I looted it. With a heavy heart, I decided to take a big risk as I thought I was done for anyways. I tossed my loot into a chest to make room in my inventory, and I took the enchanted books from the other chests with me before they all burned. All the meanwhile, the library was being burned to the ground. After a moment of silence, I booked it to a nearby tree and slept, making it daytime again. Fortunately, the dragon did not follow me. Day 5 commences. I make my way into the savanna biome and kill every cow in sight. I survived against a dragon. I was confident that a reaper spawning from me killing cows would not be enough to take me out. With 52 raw beef on me, I stumble across another village that I decide to make my home base, only a short trot from the dragon-infested village. With the XP I got from butchering dozens of cows, I managed to equip chain armor and make a shield. I obtained a few ingots and diamonds from melting down the armor found within the village. Things started to look up. Day 6, I transitioned to getting ready to trade with the villagers to get some XP, but I ended up not trading with the villagers just yet. I first decided to get comfy in the village. I set up a chest and claimed the house next to the way shrine as my own, kicking the previous owner out. I then was faced with a dilemma though. While trading with a librarian, I remembered I left all my books back at the first dragon-infested village. Since I was burning to death in the savanna biome and felt like the first 6 days didn't really yield much, I was prepared for a full reset. I gave myself an ultimatum though. I decided that if I survived getting my stuff back from the dragon village, that I would continue on this world and not reset my progress. Day 7, I revisited my old friend in the first village. That magnificent beast kept circling the village, not once landing for 3 entire days while I was gone. He continued to circle overhead, casting a shadow over the poor villagers who still remain, struggling to draw breath beneath the smoke. My battle, however, turned out to not even be with the dragon that day. While looting the library, I was approached by not 1, not 2, but 4 cinders that spawned amongst the chaos of the burning village. I fled in fear beneath a once calm pond and healed up desperately in a dark crevice, hoping that I would not be discovered by the elemental beasts that were hot on my trail or the dragon flying overhead. I had my loot though, and I just needed to get back safely. I swam hesitantly to the surface and spotted the village's waystone. In that moment, the dragon took notice to me and flew right beside me, but I managed to port away via the waystone. I'm sorry, villagers, but I'm afraid I can't save you all just yet. It is your own fault for building a village on a dragon's nest, though. You really only have yourselves to blame. Day 8, I traded with a librarian villager and a Fletcher for some XP. The librarian sadly had terrible enchantments, but the XP he gave me was still much appreciated. I made some beast treats and even some dragon treats with a few emeralds I worked so hard to acquire from trades. I was ready for night 9. And then I realized it was night 8, so I had to wait a bit longer. Day 9. The fabled day where things were about to get much more dangerous. I was ready for my Epian mount, but a Venturaptor nearly killed me and took away all my progress. That was certainly terrifying. The night, though, was upon me, and I was excited. I had died a half dozen times on night 9 on my other attempts, but this time felt different. I had defied death already 3 times this run. I felt like my luck was incredibly high. I felt unstoppable. I had a full day to burn after the Venturaptor attacked first thing in the morning, so I explored a bit nearby, only to find another village. It seems my luck really was decent this run. I raided the library, finding a glorious Protection 3 and Protection 4 book. Those would certainly come in handy for later. I took a few bookshelves and soon realized it was already nighttime. I ventured out and climbed a nearby tower, scouting out my surroundings in the darkness and complete silence. I could see cockatrices, zombies, and skeletons in the distance. I was terrified, but vigilant. I wanted an Epian really badly. I knew they were rare even on a full moon, but I kept optimistic. Losing patience though, I changed to the other village, which was a bit risky, and climbed a tower over there. This time, I shot a cockatrice in the distance out of boredom and nearly died. But it was better than being bored, I thought at the time. I grew impatient again, however, and changed villages back once more. Finally, at the end of the night, and after shooting another cockatrice out of boredom, I was approached by a curious vampire bat, right as the sun started coming up. I had nearly given up hope, but the Epian was right in front of me. And on the 3rd treat, I obtained the first addition to my squad. Mounted and ready to go, a good Epi boy. Day 10, I got ready for my first extended adventure. I wanted to soulbind my Epian, so if I died, I could resummon it. Right now, the Epian was just as mortal as I was, so in other words, the Epian was pretty much already dead. I wanted to change that. I couldn't find much besides another village, but on day 11, I found something truly astounding. I came across the largest shadow labyrinth I had ever seen. This thing was monstrous, and later I discovered that it went a few stories underground as well. I marked it on my atlas and quickly left the ominous area before something terrible might happen. Day 12, I continued my search for a battle tower, to no avail. I also found a 4-tower dungeon that I planned to clear in the future, but was too scared to cheese at the time. I would get insta-killed by a Vex if I let myself get hit, and you are stationary when looting a chest, so I didn't want to take any chances, especially after seeing that amazing Shadow Labyrinth. I continued exploring, excited to clear that Shadow Labyrinth later, when my jaw dropped. I may not have found a battle tower, but I stumbled across the rarest dungeon type in all of RLCraft, a Forest Stronghold. I could hardly believe my eyes. The fact alone that a Forest Stronghold is located within the first 1,000 blocks makes the seed an amazing one, but also having a teal lycanite dungeon? This seed is 10 out of 10. I am so glad I managed to survive and find that out. I would have never guessed my 0 battle tower hyperthermia-ridden Savannah Start seed would hold such amazing structures so close to 0-0. I decided at this point, no matter what, I would survive. Day 13, I found 2 oasis villages and another 4-tower dungeon, but still no battle tower. I was truly worried I wouldn't be able to soulbind my Epian. I needed ender pearls desperately. I started heading back to my base to gather my thoughts, but then I found something truly unexpected. I could hardly believe my eyes. My seed had a massive shadow labyrinth, a forest stronghold, and a tier 5 dragon next, right near 0-0. This seed may just be one of the best hardcore config seeds imaginable. The starting loot is not there, but the endgame loot is right there for the taking. Things get harder the further from 0-0 you go, so finding these structures this close is a lifesaver. I, for the second time, made an oath that I would never die. Perhaps that promise was all I was missing from my other runs. By day 14, I had nearly explored 1,000 blocks from 0-0 in all directions, but still did not find a single battle tower. I decided that I would just play it safe and keep my Epion by my side at all times, unsoulbound for the meantime, until I could find some ender pearls. I felt too vulnerable to wait in the darkness for enemies to spawn though, so I decided I would get stronger first before doing something so dangerous. Remember, enemies hit really hard on this config. Even near 0-0, they hit harder than normal, and you only have 2 hearts on each body part to start. On day 15, I decided to just keep breaking spawners at a broken battle tower and exploring. But then I came across a sad sight. A grounded battle tower. These battle towers take up the slot of my battle tower, and I was devastated. It seems the only battle tower near 0-0 was this grounded one. Unable to cheese this one, I would have to dig underground and try to clear it manually. This is very dangerous. I decided it was worth it, however. I needed ender pearls and loot badly, and going further from 0-0 for this stuff would be too dangerous. Day 16, I spent all day and all night underground digging a tunnel and fighting the zombies. I brought a lot of wool for bandages, but still the fighting was very risky and I ran out of wool fast. I forgot that rare enemies are more common on the hardcore config, and I was in a tough binds against choking, withering, and webbing enemies often. Looking back, I should have been more careful, but fortunately, everything worked out. Day 17, I went to the surface and got some more wool so I could continue clearing the battle tower through the night. All of night 17 I spent trying to cheese the bottom of the tower, but finally the horde of enemies stopped coming. Disengaging to heal often was exhausting, but it felt like it was the only way, since breaking the spawners was difficult considering the cave spiders and baby zombies could flit through the 1x1 gaps and one-shot me if I wasn't careful. At the end of night 17, the problem of the Tower Golem presented itself though. I ended up deciding to let the golem aggro me so it would break the floor under the tower and fall into a small hole. I would then break the chest and take the loot. Things went smoothly, and I got out unscathed. On day 18, I finished sorting my loot at my base, leveled up my building to 12 so I could make a reforging table, and then I went out for a bit more XP by breaking a few more spawners at another broken battle tower, so I could reach 8 in defense. I made some iron armor and started to feel like I could relax a bit. On that night, however, something very scary happened. I put on an Ender Queen's crown I found while standing in water, nearly ending myself in the process. That would have been a very embarrassing way to die. I forgot for a split second that would happen. It is a good thing I reacted fast and took the bauble off as soon as I did. Days 19 and 20 were pretty uneventful. I continued exploring and expanding my atlas's borders slowly but surely, looking for another battle tower. I sadly only got 2 ender pearls for my first battle tower, and I needed 2 more for my soulstone. Unluckily though, I did not find much besides a roguelike dungeon next to a graveyard on days 19 and 20. I looted the graveyard and marked the dungeon on my atlas, then continued to explore. On day 21, however, I found a kingdom. This kingdom was a breath of fresh air because I did want some lapis lazuli as well as some gold. I also got lucky and got attacked by a few banshees. The banshees came in clutch and gave me 3 ender pearls. I now had 5 in total and crafted my soulstone, soulbinding my Epion at the end of day 21. On day 22, I went out in search for obsidian in order to make a reforging table. I ended up just taking 2 obsidian from a blacksmith house. I then grabbed some more bookshelves so I could trade with the librarians in my neighboring villages. The first librarian I trade with on day 23 sells natural blocking too, which is absolutely amazing. This will help me a lot down the line. I then went back to my base to reforge my baubles for better quality. On day 24, I headed out with 2 undying quality rings of resistance and searched for a few leather so I could reforge my belt and quiver baubles just a bit more for better quality. And then I moved on to getting bookshelves in my villages. On days 25 through 30, I pretty much just leveled up villagers and broke bookshelves in all the villages I had found thus far. The only non-villager trading thing of note that happened during these 6 days was me leveling my magic to 8 and making a summoning staff on day 27. I mainly traded a lot of books I obtained from various structures with the librarians and leveled them up. I obtained a lot of emeralds and XP, from this process. The days were pretty standard in terms of progression, and it was a fair grind. I found 3 really good villagers besides the natural blocking 2 villager I found on day 23 during these 6 days. I found an upgraded potentials villager on day 26, a swifter slashes 2 villager on day 30, but the best enchantment I found by far was a strength and vitality 5 villager on day 29. I genuinely freaked out. That enchantment is one of the best for the hardcore config since hearts are so important on it. I bought 2 natural blocking 2 books, 2 strength and vitality 5 books, 4 swifter slashes 2 books, and 1 upgraded potentials book. I intended to use these enchantment books on my upcoming diamond gear, but I still needed a bit more XP. I got to 15 out of 16 defense at the end of day 30. Day 31, I continued to trade with villagers. Don't worry, I don't trade with villagers for 100 days straight, just like a lot. It was worth it though because I got an advanced looting 3 villager and a difficulties endowment 4 villager on day 31. Sadly, after buying 1 of each of the books, I was down to very few emeralds, but I could still trade with the librarians for a bit more if I needed to. Day 32, I didn't find any more good villagers, but I did almost die again, in a terrible and pathetic way. I wanted to cool down in the heat, but almost drowned, forgetting how slow you rise against a single water block. I had to use my only recall potion to save myself, or I was just plain dead. That would have tilted me beyond oblivion. Losing this amazing world in such a dumb way would really suck. Day 33, I got hit by the random event Sub-Zero and lost a bit of productivity, but I managed to find another battle tower after exploring some more. Unfortunately, just like the first battle tower, it went into the ground, making cheesing it rather difficult. I dug a hole in the side of it and continued to defeat the enemies that spawned with my Aegises. I then leveled up my attack to 8 so I could use a rapier, allowing my Aegises to do more damage by holding the rapier in my main hand. What, you expect me to go hit things with my rapier? No, not yet. Too dangerous. On day 34, I continued slowly defeating enemies at the battle tower, just enough to get 16 in defense, and then I started heading back to my base to make my diamond gear. Mid-travel, it became day 35. I took a bit of a detour back to my base in order to fill out a bit of my atlas along the way as well. Along the way, I found a witch tower, where I took a diamond, emerald, and iron block, as well as 2 gold blocks and some diamond armor that I then later melted. I also found a mini battle tower, where I found a subject mathematics 4 book and a notch apple. The most notable thing I found though was an easily killable dragon. I started taking it on as I thought it would be fairly simple considering the dragon was on top of the water. I did not have a lot of room to fly though and took a few hits of fire, which made me rethink my decision. The beast eventually decided to go airborne when it hit around 40% health and I plain retreated, letting the beast live to fight another day. I also had no reason to kill it, I just thought it would be easy since it was on the water. After retreating from the fight cowardly, tactically, I stumbled across a friendly outpost where I sought shelter for the night. On day 36, I found that my seed was an advanced mending 5 seed, which made the seed even better. I did not have enough emeralds to buy advanced mending from the villager at the time, but I made sure to mark the spot on my atlas. I then looted the rest of the structure and went on my way. I traded a bit with some librarians at a new village I found, but both librarians were terrible, but it didn't matter. I was ready to take the next step in my journey now. Day 37 came up fast. On this day, I finally crafted my diamond armor and was ready to head out to get the materials for my Stone of the Sea bauble. I obtained 2 Depthstrider 2 books from a library earlier in my playthrough, and was willing to use 1 on my diamond boots. Alongside of Stone of the Sea, 2 rings of resistance, and protection 4 diamond armor, I would feel safe enough to raid an underwater Doom-like dungeon. First, I needed a prismarine crystal and some fish though, so that is exactly what I would go for. First, I enchanted my boots with Feather Falling 4 and Depthstrider 2, and then my helm with Protection 4. I then headed out to the sea in search for a siren to slay. With my chest still extremely vulnerable, however, I would need to fight with care. Before finding any sirens though, I clear out a pirate ship's spawners for some XP. On day 38, I spot my siren prey. She sat atop a rock, seemingly minding her own business, but I knew the beast's true colors. Behind that innocent face resides a demon, waiting patiently for an unweary traveler to fall victim to her lullaby. With great caution, I approached, summoning staff in hand, and before she could sink her teeth into me, she fell, sinking to the bottom of the cold blue depths. Prismarine crystal acquired. Before heading back to my base, I looted a glowstone shelter for some enchantment books, the most notable book having Empowered Defense 2 on it, which will come in handy. Day 39 came the task of acquiring raw fish. I decided to take the passive approach by fishing in a local nearby pond. Miraculously, my 4 only casts in the water yielded the 4 raw cod I needed. Maybe I should quit the adventuring life and take up fishing. I seem to have a talent for it. By the end of 39, I was out at sea, and I had my Stone of the Sea bauble laying peacefully around my neck. Day 40, and I dove straight into the sea for the first time fearlessly. I knew where an underwater dungeon was near 00, and I was confident I would clear it. I first enchanted my chestplate with my Protection 3 book, and then I dove right inside. It was dangerous and dark, but the XP I was getting was better than any I had gotten previously in the run. The water was freezing though, so to avoid death by hypothermia, I had to frequently swim to the surface. My first target in the dungeon being a guardian. I couldn't break the spawners without a vitamins bauble because of the guardian's mining fatigue debuff, but fortunately I managed to take one down swiftly. I took more damage than expected and was genuinely scared, but I knew that this was the next step I needed to take in my journey. I had to overcome the depths of the sea and triumph over the currents and the monsters that resided within the dungeon. With only a nerfed, unenchanted iron rapier and the clothes on my back, I felt like a goldfish amongst piranhas. I had to tread very lightly and to pick my fights wisely. On day 41, I continued to clear the dungeon and finally found my first god tier loot chest. Totem of Undying, heart container, diamonds, emeralds, XP acquired. I finally put strength and vitality 5 on my armor and felt a bit more secure. Even with all those hearts though, I only had 4 base hearts on each body part. The hardcore config was not gonna go easy on me no matter how many hearts I got either, but I bravely dove back into the dungeon since I still needed more XP. I found another chest with an elytra in it, filling up my inventory. I decided to warp scroll home to deposit items in order to make room in my inventory for more. Later that night, I continued my dungeon crawl in the underwater dungeon, finding 2 shulker boxes, which was an amazing moment. This will save me a lot of time and allow me to adventure longer. On day 42 and 43, I felt like I still had a lot more to do in the dungeon, but I did not find too much more insane loot. It seems I got most of it the previous day, but I continued fighting through those 2 days. There were a few instances where my overall hearts got low, but my chest and head were pretty safe considering the protection enchantment was helping me so much. I did get my attack to 16 and my magic to 12, but other than that I did not do too much on these days, besides fighting in the dungeon. On day 44, I left the dungeon and went into the battle tower that was going down. I now felt strong enough to clear it without much worry. By day 45, I was still progressing down the battle tower without much issue, but then I met a dangerous foe. A blight skeleton. The beast hit hard and was relentless. The speed it followed me around was ludicrous, and it seemed to always want to get behind me when shooting its arrows, making it hard to block them. I ended up having to face tank it, going down to 2 out of 5 hearts on my head. It was a very scary encounter. I fought all night 45 as well as day 46 to clear the battle tower. I was surprised how long it took me to take down the battle tower in the end, but considering I had to heal all the poison damage I kept taking constantly, the time consumption made sense in the end. When I finally got a Bezor, I was almost done with the battle tower, but it certainly sped up the few final rooms. I made a diamond rapier when my iron rapier broke, and I did feel like I noticed a bit of a damage difference. With the XP I was getting from the tower, I sank all of it into magic to 20 because I wanted to use the disenchantment table soon. At the bottom of the tower, the golem did not stand a chance against me and the boys. Despite constantly inflicting me with wither, the golem went down without giving me too much of a scare. It took me all of day 47 to organize my loot into chests at the base. From the underwater dungeon to the battle tower, I had a lot of stuff to go through and items to melt down for ingots, specifically silver ingots. I also repaired my diamond helm with some of the XP that I had left over. I took a lot of damage in those dungeons, and it was a miracle that my gear didn't break. While sorting my items, I found that I was very close to being able to make a dragon's eye, so that would be my next goal. I took a break after day 47 and found that on day 48 it was April Fool's Day though, and that was concerning. As many RLCraft veterans know, holidays in RLCraft tend to revolve around your character getting killed in ridiculous ways by ridiculous enemies. After thinking for a bit, I decided to play through the holiday anyways. The first thing I did was enchant my diamond rapier with sharpness 4. I then took my sharpness 5 advanced fire aspect 2 sword that I looted from the underwater dungeon and decided to use both of those weapons back and forth as my main weapons. I would use the sword against enemies with armor and the rapiers against enemies without. On day 49, I was planning on raiding another underwater dungeon, but then I decided that I was strong enough to raid a 4 tower dungeon. I went to one close to 00 and began full clearing it for XP. I leveled up my iron skin to 1 and my random crits to 1 at the start of the dungeon. On days 50 through 53, I continued to clear the 4-tower dungeon. It was exciting and dangerous, but I would say there was no close calls. I was playing decisively and cautiously, with the biggest scare being a group of Vindicators that had the aid of a Reaper affecting me with fear. I went down to half hearts during that, but other than that, things went rather smoothly throughout the dungeon. I leveled up my defense to 24 and my iron skin to 2 on day 54. Finished up the bottom level of the 4-tower dungeon for some spectral silt, and went back to my base with all the spoils. I finished sorting my items back at the base on night 54, and set out on day 55 on a quest for a dragon. I did not have a dragon's eye, but I felt like it was time for me to make one. For that I needed a dragon's skull, and what better skull to use on my dragon's eye than the skull of a dragon that had been a thorn in my side since day 1. A dragon that nearly ended my journey before it could even begin. That green lizard boy from day 4. His time must come to an end. The fight starts off fierce, and the dragon continues to fly higher and higher in the sky, despite me not attacking him yet. The fear the beast holds in its eyes shows that it understands that it is the one being hunted. This cautiousness would make the dragon more difficult to slay than I previously thought. I charged the beast after eating a bulwark burger, only to have myself torn off my Epion and sent plummeting down to the ground. With my feather falling 4 boots though, I had no fear. I healed up, calmed my passive Epion down, and went in for round 2. This time I had a nymph and a few Aegises by my side, but the dragon went straight for my Epion, sending me again back to the ground. This dragon was smart, but it was not smart enough to understand that there was no point in resisting. I waited for my Epion and went back in. I knew it was just a matter of time before it would land. It had been flying for 52 days straight after all. It is bound to get tired eventually, right? And when it does, I'll be... Oh, it landed. I sent the boys in and dove on top of the dragon, making sure it would not fly away. The beast thrashed and thrashed, swinging me back and forth in its jaws as I continued a flurry of wet noodle attacks with my nerfed 4 attack damage sharpness 4 diamond rapier. I was taking intense damage, but after a long intense fight, the beast finally collapsed of exhaustion and sank into the pond it had destroyed. After fighting the dragon and cinders that followed, I was brought down to 1 heart on my head. I breathed a sigh of relief knowing, though, that after making a dragon's eye, this scary situation would never occur again. I looted the dragon for 14 green scales and took a somber glance around the village. Not a single villager survived. For 52 days they waited for me, but I never came. I let them down, and I was ashamed. Not a single could be heard, and would ever be heard again. All that remained was a burnt and desolate husk, vaguely resembling a once bustling village. Day 56, I made my dragon's eye with the skull of a dragon that once tormented me, and reforged some of my baubles with the spectral silt I obtained from the 4-tower dungeon. I then sent out to murder more dragons that were terrorizing the landscape, hoping that the catastrophe that struck the nearby village would never happen again as long as I'm around. The first dragon I found was a brown one, medium-sized by the looks. I threw myself on top of it and dragged it down into the water. It stood no chance. Upon waking up on day 57, though, I was met with a surprise. Another brown dragon was walking toward me casually and silently, like an assassin. Little did it know that I would be the last prey it would ever hunt. I quickly summoned my Aegises with the beast within melee range, ate a bulwark burger, and jumped into the beast's mouth, flailing violently. At nearly 500 HP, this dragon was the strongest I had yet to face. After a staggering 30 seconds, the beast finally went down. This time, I obtained 23 scales. It was getting better, but I still needed more scales. I found another brown dragon in a birch forest nearby and quickly proceeded to take it down. After charging it directly, it knocked me from the sky and landed on top of me, fighting fiercely to its last breath, but it too fell as the others. Sadly, it only gave me 11 scales. I felt like at this point, though, that I had enough scales, so I headed back to my base and organized some of my items. Knowing I was not ready to make my dragon armor, however, I decided to raid a roguelike dungeon nearby for some protection for books or protection for armor that I could disenchant for the books. From days 58 through day 61, I cleared the roguelike dungeon. The raid went without much issue, but due to my low durability on my armor, I decided to take on the dungeon slowly so that my armor would not break. I got just enough protection 4 items to give my helm and chestplate protection 4 at the time. I also had enough XP to enchant my armor and try for a weapon. After finishing the dungeon, I warped to my base and began making my new god set of gear. Day 62, my quest for my endgame set of gear began. My first stop was the nearby friendly outpost where I would buy 3 Advanced Mending 5 books for 120 emeralds in total. I did want to buy more, but I only had so many emeralds. After buying those 3 books, I grabbed 4 anvils on my way back to my base from a nearby village and began setting up my enchantment table, which I finished making completely on day 63. I made my trusty old max enchantment table, which has given me far more luck in the past than any normal 15 book shelved enchantment table. While other Minecrafters try to tell you putting more bookshelves won't give you any more luck, I swear, I always get better secondary enchantments when I make a full enchantment table. The primary enchantments remain the same, but the extra ones you get tend to be higher quality. At least for me, so I tend to do it when I can afford to. A completely floating enchantment table with nothing touching it, with bookshelves on all sides, even below and on top 1 block from the enchantment table, was completely ready by start of day 64. On day 64, I disenchant all the good items I got from my travels in preparation for enchanting my new set of gear. After I finished disenchanting my gear, I began doing enchantment resets at the enchantment table on a new diamond tower shield. I wanted Empowered Defense 2 at least, so I could combine my shield with my Empowered Defense 2 book I already had for Empowered Defense 3. I already had Natural Blocking 3 ready, which we got earlier in the run. On day 65, I enchanted my first Diamond Tower Shield with Unbreaking 3. I then went out in search of a single dragon that I would get for Dragon's Blood. After finding one, I took care of it quickly and went back to my base to continue my enchanting. When I got back, I quickly got Empowered Defense 2 from the enchantment table, and then disenchanted that shield for an Empowered Defense 2 book. I then combined my Natural Blocking books with my Empowered Defense book and placed those enchantments on my shield. I now had a Natural Blocking 3, Empowered Defense 3, Unbreaking 3, Knockback 1 shield. I then proceeded to make my new brown dragon armor. I only had a few more XP tomes, so I settled on just enchanting my chestplate and helm, leaving the pants and boots to be enchanted later. I placed Strength and Vitality 5, Protection 4, Advanced Mending, and Advanced Thorns 3 on my chestplate, and I put Protection 4, Unbreaking 3, Advanced Mending, and Aqua Affinity on my diamond helm. After reforging those 2 new armor pieces and shield for better quality, I went off to get more XP on day 66. I decided that a Doom-like dungeon that generated right under one of my villages would be a good step in the right direction in terms of loot as well as a good place for XP. The first thing of note I noticed though was a Cockatrice Spawner. A large violet cockatrice was suffocating in the walls. I knew I couldn't tame that one, but I was excited to try to tame a cockatrice since I normally never got the opportunity to have one in a mount, considering its rarity. I returned to my base to grab some dragon treats. When I returned, I didn't see the spawner initially, so I just kept clearing the dungeon normally, under the impression I would soon find the spawner again. After fighting in the dungeon all night, I found the spawner again on day 67 and decided I only wanted a cockatrice level 3 or a rare variant to tame. After 5 cockatrice spawned, I finally saw him. A gray and blue ashen cockatrice met eye contact with me. I knew we were going to be great friends. I tamed and soulbound the beast. I now had a powerful ally. Cockatrice will paralyze enemies it hits in a large AoE radius around it, and it attacks extremely fast. No enemies around me will ever be able to approach me again as long as my Cockatrice is by my side. As I neared the end of the dungeon, I noticed a dragon den that formed right next to it. Without waking up the beast, I marked the spot on my atlas for later and continued to clear the Doom-like dungeon throughout days 68 and 69. I managed to make a few heart containers throughout the dungeon, and my max hearts were starting to feel pretty weighty. While clearing the dungeon, however, I found it extremely apparent I needed to get a better melee weapon. I had so many instances where I would get cornered by dozens of enemies because my damage output was so incredibly low. I just could not defeat enemies faster than they would spawn. When I got back to my base on late day 70, I immediately started making preparations for creating an endgame weapon. I had some leftover XP though, so I decided to first enchant my dragon boots with Feather Falling 4, Depth Strider 3, High Jump 2, Advanced Mending 5, and Protection 4. I then gathered all the enchantments I wanted to put on my new upcoming Fire Dragonbone Rapier and got to work getting a base weapon from the enchantment table, as well as doing some enchantment resets in an attempt to get some decent enchantments. It took me all day 71 to get my preparations complete for enchanting my new weapon. Day 72 though, after a lot of resets, I decided that I didn't have nearly enough XP to complete the weapon just yet, so I wouldn't start enchanting it. I headed out to get more XP first, and what better place to go than the Forest Stronghold. Without a goated weapon, I was a bit nervous, but I knew exactly how to clear the dungeon safely and where all the loot was situated. I went into the dungeon without cheesing it, and man, the loot in this structure is nuts. On day 72, I was still feeling out the dungeon, making sure I was safe in it, but on day 73, I started going hard. I started by clearing the exterior towers of the dungeon, and I got some Totems of Undying, some ingots, and 3 XP tomes in the process. Since I did not have a solid weapon, I broke spawners as soon as I could though, as each enemy I had to defeat would take some time. My Cockatrice sure helped me a lot with the exterior fighting at least. That thing is an absolute monster. Day 74, I finally dove into the belly of the Forest Stronghold, into the best loot rooms. I was hoping for a fairy ring, but sadly did not find one, but I certainly was getting a lot of XP. Heart crystals for heart containers, spectral silt, silver ingots, enchanted books, diamond, gold, and emeralds. Day 75, I was hit by the random event Reptile Ruckus, so I left the Forest Stronghold for a bit to make sure strong Lycanite mobs did not spawn too much inside the dungeon. I then went right back to the grind within. The belly of the dungeon still yielded many obstacles and enemies that I needed to defeat, but I was cautious enough to prevail, especially with the boys and my Cockatrice by my side. I fought nearly all night 76, day 76, and night 76 in the belly of the Forest Stronghold, but I finally got back to my base and deposited a lot of my gear. It took me most of day 77 to organize my loot, but before the day was out, I was on my way back to the Forest Stronghold to finish what I started. Now at max base heart containers, I no longer needed to collect heart crystals and crystal dust, fortunately, so looting will get a bit faster. When I got to the Forest Stronghold, I was met with a problem though. I knew how incredibly dangerous the main body of the dungeon is from personal experience. With my current gear, I would most likely die if I did not play this a certain way. As you progress through the main tower of the dungeon, there will be a couple evoker spawners that pop out evokers like it's nobody's business, as well as there will be a handful of vindicator spawners hidden amongst the dozens of witch spawners. I knew that if I wanted to be efficient and safe, I would need to break the spawners before too many evokers and vindicators spawned. So, I did just that. Like a bull in a china shop, I rushed through the stronghold, ignoring enemies and breaking spawners. If I did not go fast enough, the swarms of Vexes the evoker spawned would be my undoing. After breaking the last evoker spawner at the top loot room, I rushed back out, and I was safe. I survived the Forest Stronghold. I spent the majority of night 77 finishing up and looting the Forest Stronghold. I stripped every chest clean of anything I wanted or needed, and I took every Wither Skeleton Skull that the structure could provide me. With 7 Wither Skeleton Skulls now, I had more than enough to summon a Wither for a Nether Star. The prospects of fighting the final boss loomed heavily over my head, and in my eyes, I only had 22 days to defeat them. On day 78, I organized my loot into chests at my base and went out to my nearby kingdom to grab some glowstone dust. I got more than enough blaze powder and silver ingots from the Forest Stronghold, but surprisingly I had almost no glowstone. After running that errand, I made nearly a stack of glowing ingots and was ready to reforge my baubles and create a poison stone. With Viper 2 and Envenom 2 about to be on my new weapon, I needed to make sure I had a poison stone to back up those amazing enchantments. On day 79, I reforged my vitamins and soon to be replaced Bezor for Undying or Hardy quality, and then I made a nether portal. I needed some brown mushrooms to make some fermented spider eyes for my poison stone bauble, and for me the nether was the best place to get those. After grabbing those brown mushrooms, I warp scrolled back to the surface world and went out in search of some sugarcane for sugar. Now all I needed were spider eyes. I decided that the nearly full cleared Doom-like dungeon nearby I raided would be a quick and easy way to get the spider eyes I needed. Spider eyes were acquired quickly and the poison stone was made soon after. I then proceeded to reforge all my baubles for Undying or Hardy quality and then jumped right into bed. Day 80, I took my 12 full XP tomes and started doing enchantment resets at my enchantment table. I wanted Lifesteal 4, Education 3, and really just about anything good. I was ready to enchant my rapier now with Vampirism instead of Lifesteal and just using Adept 2 instead of Education, but I would much prefer Education so I could put my advanced looting book on that I bought from my villager earlier. As you may know, the enchantment Adept does allow you to get more XP from slaying enemies, but it does not stack with advanced looting. The enchanting overall did not go too well though. From days 80 to 82, all I got from the enchantment table were Education 3, Rapid Fire 2, and Envenomed 2. On day 83, I continued enchanting though and got Swifter Slashes 4 very quickly. I now had Swifter Slashes 5, which was certainly a win. The biggest win of day 83 though was when I got Viper 3, and now I had Viper 4. Things were truly coming together. On day 84, I got the enchantment Atomic Deconstructor, and now I decided that I was ready to enchant my rapier. All I needed now was a base enchantment from my enchantment table to help me get started to allow for cheaper overall enchanting costs. As you know, any enchantment you put on your item from your enchantment table is quote-unquote free. All added enchantment books after that will cost just as much as if your weapon was unenchanted. I was hoping for a good base, but after a handful of fails, I decided it wasn't worth it, and that I would just be better off just enchanting the rapier now, or I would not have enough XP to make the weapon at all. And I did not want to clear another dungeon with that sharpness 4 rapier. It just does so little damage against the enemies on the hardcore config. The first thing I did was organize my enchantments in order of most expensive to least expensive. I would use the enchantment cost to determine which books I would want to combine and when to combine them. There are a lot of different ways to combine books, and no particular order is too much better than any other. But generally, combining expensive enchantments with cheaper enchantments is a good way to go. I began enchanting my weapon. I combined Swifter Slashes 5 with Viper 3 and put that doubled enchantment book on my weapon. I then combined Advanced Looting with Curse of Possession and Difficulties Endowment 4 with Mending. Then I slapped those 2 books together for a single enchantment book with all 4 of those enchantments on it. I then put that ×4 enchanted book on my rapier for the total cost of 32 levels. My weapon now had 6 enchantments on it. I continued enchanting on day 85. I could have put all the enchantments on without upgraded potentials, but I would need to get more XP if I wanted to do that, considering I only had 3 XP tomes left. So, to avoid me having to go get more XP, I decided to use upgraded potentials after adding a few more enchantments. So, instead of combining 3 enchanted books with 3 enchantment books for a ×6 book on my item like I would normally, I just combined Education 3 and Sharpness 4, and then combined Atomic Deconstructor with Parry 2, and then put those 2 books together. I then put that ×4 enchantment book on my item for the total level cost of 29. I then put upgraded potentials on my item and finished off things simply and easily from there. I originally didn't care too much for upgraded potentials, but he certainly came in handy. Even with upgraded potentials though, I couldn't put on the last 2 enchantments, Arc/3 and Subject English 3. I did squeeze on Lifesteal 3 and Envenom 3, but sadly needed 22 more levels. I decided that the God tier Shadow Labyrinth near 0-0 would be the next place for me to go. I brought my anvil with me and decided to finish enchanting the weapon mid-dungeon clear. On my way to the dungeon, I got intercepted by a dragon, but with my new weapon and riding a Cockatrice that has even more HP than the dragon does, the fight was not a problem. I quickly hit level 22 in the dungeon and finally had my completed glorious weapon. With this bad boy, I felt pretty secure. For the first time in 85 days, I felt safe. Day 86, I went back to my base and made myself a pair of black dragon pants. I also brought along a few enchantments and an anvil with the intention of adding the enchantments on those pants as I cleared the dungeon. I also brought an extra Advanced Mending 5 book that I planned to put on my shield along the way. By day 87, I was inside the Teal Lycanite dungeon, and bosses were falling left and right. Soulstones were practically raining from the ceiling. Not to my surprise, however, I dealt too much damage to the Lunar Grue mini-boss. I regrettably realized that I was indeed above the damage cap, so I would need to make another weapon if I wanted to burn the final bosses with confidence. In the meantime, I just let my Aegises and Cockatrice defeat the bosses, since I myself did too much damage for the damage to register against some. I spent all day 88 and night 88 in the Teal Lycanite dungeon. Even with my god tier items, it took me an entire day and night to clear the dungeon. This Shadow Labyrinth was truly massive, but it was a very exciting experience for me. The loot wasn't super amazing, but I did get 5 stacks of diamonds, which was pretty nutty. With the soul stones I got from defeating the bosses, however, I now had everything I needed in order to defeat the final bosses, and day 89, that quest began. After sorting my items into my chest, I had to come up with a new weapon that I could use against the final bosses. I had an Advanced Sharpness 2 Dark Shadows 2 weapon I could use, but the weapon would only do a good amount of damage as long as things were completely dark. In order to take full advantage of this against a Malgalich, I would need to fight at night, which is a bit scary. I decided after some thought that that wouldn't be much of an issue, and I trekked forward. I put Lifesteal 3 and Education 3 on that sword, and placed that boss melting weapon on my quick bar. The weapon certainly wouldn't do 50 damage constantly for max DPS on the bosses, but my guess would be that it would do around 20 to 30 damage, which is still pretty solid. I also planned on putting Swifter Slashes 4 on my item later. Day 90, I went into the nether to get some soul sand and to summon the wither for a nether star. I also cleared a bit of a battle tower in the nether, because I wanted a bit more XP. I summoned the wither near the roof of the nether, and it was a bit of a chaotic fight since he would teleport away. His loot also teleported pretty far, so I almost didn't find it. I am glad I decided to look around instead of assume the loot just bugged out though. On day 91, I made some golden carrot juice and got mentally prepared for Asmodeus. I was really nervous because I had never fought the final bosses on the hardcore config before, and a blight boss would just be the end of me. Losing 91 days of progress would have made me scrap the entire project. I, however, had to forge onwards, as there was nothing left for me to do in terms of gameplay progression besides the final bosses. They needed to fall. Late day 91, I stand, looming over the boss altar, reconsidering if I was ready or not, and then, as if possessed by some warlord gamer, I just started the fight. Immediately my eyes pop out of my head. The boss is rare, not infernal. I was lost for words in a good way, because in the hardcore config's notes it says that all final bosses are infernal. Did Shivaxi change it, or did he not explain it properly in the notes? I was under the impression the boss would only be infernal, which would give the boss a lot more HP and crazy effects that would almost certainly kill me. Much to my delight, I lunged at the boss with a glimmer in my eye. There was hope. Hope that the config truly wasn't impossible. I thought I was certainly dead, but a Weber Berserk Asmodeus at 0-0 would not be nearly enough to defeat me considering my gear. My Cockatrice following in battle next to me was a bit scary, but I continued my onslaught on the boss, and after tanking a lot of Cacodemon blasts in stage 3 of the fight, the boss glided over to me and fell to my sword. Asmodeus came crashing to the ground. We had defeated the first of 4 final bosses, and it felt good. Really good. Day 92 I wasted no time. I crafted a waystone, another soul key, and a demon altar. Rahalvart was next on my hit list. I built the Rahalvart altar next to the roof of the nether so I could break through the bedrock and place a waystone up there after the fight. The Rahalvart fight was scary, but I had a game plan. After burning through his stage 1 and 2 as well as some golden carrot juice, I took out my summoning staff for phase 3. I tapped him to trigger the phase and then summoned all of my boys as well as my Cockatrice. With our combined might, Rahalvart could hardly summon his green flames, and he too came crashing down to earth. The ruler of the underworld had been defeated. On day 93, I knew what was next, but I was very scared. Amalgalich was next on my target list, but that boss will one-shot me no matter how I look at it. I decided to equip a cross necklace as insurance and have my totem of undying in my offhand while fighting, but that still wouldn't be enough to save me if I actually let myself get pulled in. I decided to be even more safe, I would bring a stack of ender pearls as a failsafe. To take full advantage of my Dark Shadows backup rapier, I would need to fight at night, and to make sure the boss hits as soft as possible, I would have to fight him near 0-0. So that is what I did. On my way to 0-0, I got revisited by an old friend. The Black Dragon at 0-0 was still there waiting for me. With a heavy heart, I met that worthy adversary with a sharp glare and charged it, bringing it down to earth with only a couple swings of my insane sword. I waited for nighttime before summoning Amalgalich, and right as the sun went down, it was showtime. My only hope is that the boss is not Blight or Infernal, as well as I hope it isn't choking, since I forgot to bring a ranged weapon. If any of these 3 prerequisites were met, I would just retreat to fight him another day. To my surprise, the boss truly wasn't any of these 3 things. Instead, he was even scarier. The boss was an Amalgalich of cloaking. In other words, he was invisible. I would have no way of knowing if he would start pulling me in or not. I was terrified, but knew that I couldn't back down. This boss was very doable, I just needed to be extremely cautious. The fight starts off normally with me going in bravely with my melee weapon. I get the boss to around 80% HP and decide to ender pearl to safety, as I was afraid of being pulled in, since I wouldn't be able to see the animation. Lo and behold, a few seconds later, he begins wiping everything in the vicinity. I was only a few seconds away from losing everything. I go back in for round 2 swinging away, and out of fear, I back away when the boss's health hit 75%. The next time though, I decided I was going to stick it out until phase 2 no matter what. Phase 2 indeed was triggered, and I knew what I had to do. The same plan as Rahalvart stage 3. I was going to summon my boys and Cockatrice at the end of the stage to burst down the boss. All I needed to do now was execute everything smoothly. I drank my last golden carrot juice, summoned my Aegises, called forth my Cockatrice, and dashed into the boss. Or well, where I assumed the boss was at least. It was an intense DPS race that I couldn't afford to lose, because the sun was coming up. Soon, my Dark Shadows rapier's damage would take a massive hit. It was now or never. Everything came down to this very moment. With an intense final burst, the beast, while fighting bravely, could not handle the onslaught of the boys and my Cockatrice. Amalgalich, the Lord of the Dead, had fallen. Woo! Day 94 starts right at the arena. I take my boss drops and get ready for the scary end. All that was left now was the Ender Dragon. When the beast falls, I will have officially beaten the RLCraft hardcore config, and things still felt too good to be true. I made my Eyes of Ender at my base and began my hunt for an end stronghold. It took me into the end of day 94 to find the stronghold, and by day 95 I was inside the end fighting the Ender Dragon. This Ender Dragon fight, however, was unlike any I had ever faced. I charged the Ender Dragon with my god sword, expecting to do it in pretty easily, but the beast took next to no damage. I knew the Ender Dragon does not have a damage cap, so what gives? My weapon hits like a truck. This Ender Dragon seemed to have thousands of HP, and that certainly is not normally the case. This made me think that the Ender Dragon must have been an Ultimate Bulwark Ender Dragon or an Infernal Ender Dragon. Without knowing what type of enemy the Ender Dragon was, I decided that I had to be very cautious. Looking back at the footage, it does seem like the Ender Dragon I fought indeed just had incredible defense, and it must have been immune to my Envenomed and Viper enchantments. That certainly would make sense as to why he was so tanky. In the end though, the beast fell and would no longer harass the poor residents of the Minecraft universe. While my job seemingly was done, my 100 days certainly weren't. I still had some things I wanted to do, and I had 5 days to do them. Toward the end of day 95, I went on a shulker box shopping spree, and on day 96, I was still on the hunt for more. But on day 96, something incredibly weird happened. I spotted an enemy I had never seen before. Thousands of hours of RLCraft experience, though, was screaming at me that whatever that thing was, that it was really dangerous. Was it because of April Fools, perhaps? I was unsure, but I was beyond curious. After saving the world from all 4 final bosses, could this one enemy really pose that much of a threat? No. Oh my goodness. If my Cockatrice wasn't paralyzing this enemy, I was dead. Blights are just way too fast, attack way too fast, and absolutely obliterate shields. My Cockatrice saved my life, and I hope to never see another 500 HP Rainbow Blight ever again, because my heart seemingly sank further than it ever had before in that moment. After that scare, I just finished up raiding a nearby end city and returned to my base. I only made 11 shulker boxes, but I did not want to spend another second in the end. That place is just wacky, especially without a fairy ring. I warp scrolled home and slept, making it day 97. On day 97, I organized my items, made a savage summoning staff, and stored my XP. Made a silk touch pickaxe for my new ender chest, and began my search for skeleton skulls to make a portal into the Lost Cities dimension, which was the last dimension I needed to explore on this playthrough. I tend to go into the Lost Cities dimension when making my base, but considering it took me so long to beat the game, I decided that I couldn't make a cool enough base in only 3 days. I still wanted to make the portal though. To get my skulls, I looked inside the spruce houses in my villages, and everything was going smoothly. Except for, in one house, I randomly got jump scared by a dragon, which I proceeded to 5-shot, but it was scary nonetheless. For days 98 and 99, I organized my items some more, color-coded some shulkers, and got really surprised when entering the Lost Cities dimension. The dimension had me spawn right in the middle of a village, and the village was nearly identical to the one I made my base at. There was a library intact and a lot of healthy villagers. Normally the Lost Cities dimension is an ominous place with abandoned and haunted buildings, so seeing such a healthy village was certainly a pleasant sight for sore eyes. On day 100, I decided to drop everything I was doing and to finish off a sleeping giant that rested beneath the surface since the very beginning. I wanted to go slay one of the largest tier 5 dragons I had ever seen. With an adventurous spirit, I flew over to the first dragon's dwelling and peered down on the beast, peacefully asleep. But I would not be fooled. This beast would have my head if it knew I was nearby all this time. I needed to get the jump on it. I charged up my summoning staff to max and jumped right into the den and released the boys to wreak havoc upon the dragon. I also summoned my Cockatrice to get in on the action. The dragon thrashed and screeched, but it wasn't letting go. This female dragon had overstayed its welcome near my base, and I wanted what it most likely had on it: a dragon egg. The beast put up the biggest fight out of anything I had fought thus far, but regardless, the beast still fell, and I stripped it of its scales and bones. Hidden amongst the scales was a small green egg, full of life. Should I return to this world, I am sure that a strong and loyal companion resides within. I finished off the day defeating the other tier 5 dragon that was nearby my Doom-like dungeon, but it was not as strong as the first, and it did not drop an egg. And I also revisited all my villagers, thanking them for their wonderful contributions to my journey. All in all, the 100 days really taught me a lot about RLCraft, and made me truly appreciate the difficulty and beauty of the hardcore config. With a heavy heart and a peaceful grin on my face, I bid my world carries, my strength and vitality 5 villager and Cockatrice farewell, and dreamt the night away. 100 days on the RLCraft hardcore config by Shivaxi. Mission complete. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to see the whole run, there are links to unlisted videos in the description that hold the entire journey uncut. Be warned though, it is over 20 hours of footage that I wasn't even sure I would keep, since if I died I would lose all my progress. If you do want to see how things went for yourself though, the option is certainly available for you. Now though, I will bid you farewell. Like and subscribe if you want, it really helps me a lot, and I hope you have a phenomenal day. Bye bye. Ow, stop webbing me, bro.